Hey guys, tonight you're stepping inside the smoky, candlelit world of medieval inns after dark, where exhausted travellers shared straw beds with strangers, suspicious merchants hid coins in their boots, and nobody trusted the stew too much. Outside the walls, winter roads vanished into black forests and freezing marshes, but inside you'd find crackling hearth fires, dripping cloaks, whispered rumours, too much ale, and maybe a thief or two sleeping beside you. So before we settle in for the night, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these quiet journeys into the medieval world. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's wander into the warm glow of a medieval inn after sunset. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing beneath the dripping shadow of a medieval town gate while cold mist from the river creeps around your boots like something alive. The evening bell from a distant abbey rolls through the damp air in slow waves, and somewhere beyond the walls a dog barks once before deciding the effort is not worth repeating. Smoke hangs low over the rooftops. Wet straw sticks to the hem of your cloak. A cartwheel grinds through mud nearby with all the dignity of a dying goose. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You clutch your hands beneath your cloak for warmth, while torchlight flickers across old stone darkened by centuries of rain and soot. The guards above the gate look half asleep, wrapped in fur-lined cloaks stiff with winter damp. One of them sneezes directly into the wind and immediately regrets every decision that brought him here. Truthfully, you probably would not last a week out here. Your knees would give up somewhere between the muddy roads, the suspicious stew, and the nightly possibility of sharing a bed with 3 strangers and perhaps 1 goat. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the town gate creaks open ahead of you, comment your location and local time. It is always comforting to know who else is wandering these cold roads tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The guards let you pass after collecting a small market toll, though not before staring suspiciously at the mud on your boots as if mud itself might be planning a crime. You duck beneath the heavy oak gate doors banded with black iron straps slick from drizzle. The smell changes immediately once you step inside. Outside the walls there had been wet earth, horse sweat, and river reeds. Inside there is smoke. Smoke from peat fires, smoke from beeswax candles, smoke trapped beneath low roofs and tangled in hanging laundry. Beneath it lingers the smell of ale, damp wool, fish brine, stale rushes spread across stone floors, and humanity packed too tightly together for too many generations. The streets twist uphill in narrow lanes lit by lanterns swinging above shop fronts. Water trickles down gutters cut along the road centre. Somewhere nearby a cooper finishes hammering iron hoops onto a barrel while cursing softly at the cold. The sound echoes between timber houses leaning toward one another overhead, like tired old men sharing secrets. You move carefully because the mud here has layers. Fresh mud on top, older mud beneath, then, perhaps, the ancient memory of all mud that has ever existed in this town since the reign of some long-forgotten king. A passing mule splashes your boots anyway. The mule does not apologize. Ahead, you spot the glow of a roadside shrine tucked beneath an archway. A small painted saint stares down through soot-dark varnish, while travellers pause to touch the stone for luck. Some swear roadside shrines protect weary strangers from thieves during the night. Others insist the shrines mostly protect thieves from being caught. No one can quite agree whether the saints themselves pay much attention either way. You pass beneath hanging signs creaking in the wind, the painted swan, the miller's rest, the crooked candle. Each promises warmth and shelter, though from the noise spilling into the streets, some promise more trouble than rest. A pair of monks hurry past with their heads bowed against the drizzle, sandals slapping wet stone. One carries an iron lantern, the other clutches a basket covered with cloth. You catch the smell of herbs drifting from beneath it. Sage, rosemary, bitter tansy. Medieval folk trust herbs for nearly everything. Headaches, fevers, bad dreams, cursed livestock, suspicious neighbours. Somewhere in Europe at this very moment, a woman is almost certainly rubbing garlic on something that garlic should never touch. The abbey bell sounds again, deeper now. You count 7 slow tolls. Evening settles fully over the town, and with darkness comes the true life of the inns. Travellers who spent the day trudging through rain now gather beneath roofs before the gates close for the night. Merchants guard their wagons nervously. Pilgrims compare roads and rumours. Messengers ride hard for shelter before the forest paths vanish into blackness. A few wealthy visitors head towards stone guest houses attached to monasteries where silence and prayer await. Most people, however, end up where you are headed now. The ordinary inn, which is to say, a crowded building full of smoke, noise, damp clothing, questionable smells, and enough shared illness to alarm a modern physician into immediate retirement. You follow the sound of laughter around a corner where torchlight spills across puddles. There, hanging above a low timber doorway, sways the painted sign of a boar rearing beneath a yellow moon. Rainwater drips steadily from its wooden snout. The boar and lantern, warm orange light flickers through shutters. Shadows move across wax-paper windows. You hear tankards striking tables inside alongside the rough melody of someone attempting a song that should perhaps remain unattempted forever. A sleepy dog lies beside the doorway. One eye opens as you approach. After deciding you are neither food nor danger, the dog sighs heavily and resumes sleeping. This may be the wisest creature you encounter all night. You duck beneath the low doorway and enter. Warmth hits first. Not clean warmth, not fresh warmth. Medieval warmth arrives mixed with smoke, damp wool, roasting onions, spilled ale, horse leather, wet straw, and humanity. But after hours outside in the river fog, it feels magnificent anyway. The common room glows beneath hanging candles whose wax drips onto iron holders fixed to blackened beams overhead. Rushes cover parts of the floor, though they have clearly not been changed recently. Some inns refresh their rushes with herbs to sweeten the smell. This establishment appears to have surrendered gracefully to fate several winters ago. Long tables crowd the room. Travellers hunch over steaming bowls of pottage while servants weave carefully between benches carrying trenchers of bread. Smoked fish and thick ale dark as oak bark. Cloaks hang drying beside the hearth. A merchant loudly insists his mule understands spoken Latin. Even now, it is hard to tell whether he truly believes this or has simply consumed heroic amounts of ale. At the hearth itself sits an old woman turning chestnuts over the fire with a knife blackened from use. She glances at you once, sharp-eyed beneath a wool hood. Many medieval inns keep such women nearby. Widows, cousins, retired servants, distant relations. They know every traveller's business before sunrise and probably half their secrets too. Behind the counter stands the innkeeper himself, broad as a barrel and balding beneath thinning grey hair. Iron keys hang from his belt beside a wooden tally board marked with chalk lines. His expression suggests he has spent 30 years settling arguments over beds, ale, missing boots, and whether somebody's cousin truly deserves free lodging because he once met a bishop. He notices you immediately. Innkeepers always do. Because after dark, every stranger walking through the door might mean profit, trouble, disease, robbery, or occasionally all four together. The room quiets slightly as you step forward through the smoke. Outside, rain taps steadily against the shutters. Inside, the night at the inn is only beginning. The innkeeper watches you approach with the calm caution of a man who has seen every possible kind of traveller and trusted almost none of them completely. Firelight flickers across his broad face, while the iron keys at his belt clink softly each time he shifts his weight. Somewhere behind him, ale spills. Somewhere else, somebody laughs too loudly at a joke already dead on arrival. You stop before the counter and brush road dust from your cloak, though the effort feels mostly symbolic at this point. The mud of medieval roads has a stubborn personality. Once it chooses you, it remains emotionally committed. Room the innkeeper asks. His voice sounds like gravel rolled inside a wooden bucket. A corner near the fire if the saints are kind, you answer. The saints charge extra. That earns a few tired chuckles from nearby tables. The innkeeper studies you another moment before nodding toward a servant girl carrying wooden cups stacked to her chin. She cannot be older than 14. Wisps of hair escape her linen cap while she moves quickly through the crowded room, avoiding boots, dogs, spilled ale, and wandering hands with the skill of someone trained by necessity rather than patience. She clears space near the hearth while the innkeeper gestures for your payment first. Always first. Inns after dark are built upon suspicion nearly as much as timber. You place a few worn coins onto the counter. He bites one gently, squints at it beside the candlelight, then drops it into a small locked chest. Medieval people do not entirely trust coins. Kings occasionally reduce silver content while insisting the money remains equally valuable, which somehow never convinces anyone except perhaps other kings. The innkeeper leans closer. No fighting or no knives drawn indoors. Stable closes at moonrise. Chamber pots outside unless you pay for upper rooms. You nod solemnly at this final warning, as though chamber pot policy is a sacred legal matter. Truthfully, in medieval inns, it almost is. A thin man near the hearth mutters, "Upper rooms leak anyway." "They leak less than your roof," replies someone else. The room approves of this exchange. You settle onto a bench near the fire where damp heat presses against your face while your back still remembers the cold outdoors. A servant places before you a rough wooden trencher holding coarse bread, onion pottage, and a slice of smoked eel shiny with grease. Beside it arrives a clay cup of dark ale thick enough to feel halfway toward becoming soup. The smell alone restores part of your soul. At neighbouring tables, travellers settle into the slow rituals of night shelter. Cloaks steam dry beside the fire. Boots are loosened carefully. Gloves stretch toward warmth. One merchant removes his hat and immediately reveals hair flattened into a shape last seen on frightened sheep. The common room breathes like a living thing. Smoke curls upward through dark rafters blackened by decades of soot. Beeswax candles gutter in iron holders. Shadows drift across walls where faded painted saints watch silently above the crowd. Somewhere overhead, floorboards creak beneath unseen footsteps from the upper rooms. Those upper rooms sound grand when spoken aloud. In reality, they usually contain narrow beds stuffed with straw, draughty shutters, and blankets carrying the spiritual memory of every traveller who's ever sneezed into them. You tear bread slowly while listening. Listening matters in inns. Roads carry news long before official messengers do. Wars, famines, taxes, plague rumours, failed harvests, royal marriages, burned villages, miracle sightings. All drift through these rooms attached to muddy boots and tired voices. At the table nearest the hearth, two wool merchants argue softly over bridge tolls farther south. Apparently a local lord has doubled payment for loaded carts crossing his river. One merchant swears the lord is repairing roads with the money. The other laughs so hard ale comes out through his nose. Beside them sits a pilgrim wearing a weathered cloak stitched with tiny badges collected from shrines across Christendom. Pewter shells, little saints, crosses darkened by rain and handling. Pilgrims often sew such badges onto hats and cloaks as proof of journeys completed. Some also believe the badges protect against illness or robbery. Others quietly sell counterfeit ones in market squares. No one can quite agree how many holy relics across Europe are genuine either. At this very moment, there are probably enough alleged fragments of the true cross scattered through monasteries to rebuild an entire medium-sized fishing boat. The pilgrim catches you looking and smiles faintly. "Road from the east floods badly," he says. 3 wagons stuck near the marsh. You nod with proper sympathy while chewing eel. Across the room, the old woman by the fire continues roasting chestnuts. A striped cat sleeps in her lap, unconcerned by noise or argument. She occasionally mutters small blessings toward the hearth whenever sparks jump too high. Some swear fires attract wandering spirits after midnight if left untended. Others say inns merely attract drunk people who mistake shadows for ghosts. Honestly, both explanations feel possible. A gust rattles the shutters suddenly, and for a moment the room falls quieter beneath the wind outside. Rain taps steadily against the roof. Beyond these walls lies darkness, cold ditches, forest tracks, swollen rivers, and lonely roads where travellers disappear more often than polite society prefers discussing. That is why inns matter so deeply. Not because they are comfortable. Comfort, in the medieval world, is relative. Tonight's bench could easily become tomorrow's luxury memory if the alternative involves sleeping beneath freezing rain beside a muddy cartwheel. No inns matter because they mean walls, fire, witnesses, soup, human voices, dogs sleeping near the hearth, lantern light beneath storms, small islands of warmth inside enormous darkness. A young scribe enters from outside, shaking rainwater from his hood. Ink stains darken his fingertips. He clutches a leather satchel protectively beneath his cloak as though it contains royal treasure. Which, for a scribe, it effectively does. Paper costs dearly. Ink freezes in winter. A single damaged document can ruin months of work and trigger arguments among men already inclined toward argument. The innkeeper eyes him carefully. "Writing, man," mutters the merchant beside you. They drink little but remember everything. The scribe secures a seat near the wall and orders watered wine. Someone asks whether war truly threatens in the north. He shrugs. Depends who tells the tale. That answer satisfies everyone and no one simultaneously. Near the doorway, 2 carters play dice using worn bone cubes on an overturned barrel. They mutter prayers before each throw. Medieval gambling carries endless superstition. Some players rub lucky saints' medals. Others refuse to throw dice with the left hand. One man insists victory belongs only to gamblers who avoid onions beforehand, though even he cannot explain why. He is currently losing badly. The servant girl passes again, carrying a fresh pitcher of ale. As she leans near, you notice a small pouch hanging from her belt filled with dried lavender and juniper. "For sickness, you ask?" "For smells," she replies immediately. "Fair enough." Hours pass gently beside the fire. Tankards empty and refill. Stories grow longer. Rain continues whispering beyond the shutters. Somewhere overhead, a child cries briefly before falling silent again. Travellers stretch sore feet toward warmth, while steam rises faintly from drying cloaks. Then the inn door opens once more. Cold air rolls inside, carrying river mist and the smell of wet horses. Every head turns instinctively toward the entrance, because after dark each new arrival changes the room. The door groans inward beneath a gust of rain-heavy wind, and a pair of travellers stumble inside, trailing cold mist behind them. One carries a lantern nearly extinguished by the weather. The other drags a bundle wrapped in oilcloth that drips steadily onto the rushes. The innkeeper sighs the sigh of a man already imagining mud on his floor. The newcomers pause beneath the doorway while the common room studies them in silence for half a heartbeat. Medieval people possess a deeply refined skill for judging strangers instantly and often unfairly. Cloak quality, boots, accents, posture, weapons, dirt, even how a traveller holds a spoon all become evidence in silent trials conducted beside hearth fires across Europe every night. The taller newcomer lowers his hood first. A drover, by the look of him, weather-cracked skin, straw caught in his beard, hands roughened from reins and rope. The second traveller proves younger, perhaps his son or assistant, with cheeks reddened raw from wind. "Stable full?" the older man asks hopefully. "Nearly," says the innkeeper. "Depends whether your beasts kick. Only when insulted. That's still better manners than most guests." A few people laugh softly while the innkeeper waves them toward the rear yard. The room exhales again. Conversation returns gradually like rainwater flowing back into old channels. You settle deeper beside the hearth while warmth slowly reaches your boots at last. Nearby, a servant spreads fresh wood onto the fire. Sparks leap upward, briefly illuminating soot-black rafters overhead, where bunches of drying herbs hang beside smoked rabbit carcasses. The smell thickens pleasantly now. Wood smoke, onion broth, wet wool, nutmeg from somebody wealthier than the rest, ale yeast, beeswax, damp leather gloves drying too close to flames. The true perfume of a medieval inn after dark. You sip slowly from your cup. Medieval ale is safer than water more often than anyone likes admitting aloud. Brewing kills much of what lurks in stagnant wells and crowded town cisterns. Children drink weak ale regularly. Monks brew it carefully. Travellers trust it instinctively. Though trust, admittedly, becomes more difficult after the fourth cup. At the far end of the hall, a musician has appeared almost by accident. No one noticed him unpacking the little stringed rebec resting now against his shoulder. He plucks softly at first, uncertain whether the room wants music tonight. It does. Not loudly, not joyfully, just enough. The melody drifts beneath the conversation like smoke curling along beams. A few travellers hum under their breath. One old merchant taps thick fingers against the table in time with the tune, while staring into the fire as though remembering another winter many years ago. Even now, it is hard to tell whether medieval inns feel lonelier or less lonely after music begins. A servant boy passes carrying a basket of fresh rushes mixed with lavender stems. He scatters them near the hearth where older rushes have become damp and trampled flat. Wealthier inns sometimes replace rushes daily. Poorer establishments wait until the floor itself begins fighting back. You catch the pilgrim beside you sniffing the air appreciatively. "Better than the abbey at Thornbridge," he murmurs. "Their guest hall smelled like wet sheep for 3 days. Perhaps it was sheep. Would not surprise me." He tears bread carefully while studying the room. Pilgrims become excellent observers. Roads teach caution quickly. You notice more details now as the evening deepens. A fur trader asleep against the wall with one hand still gripping his purse string beneath the table. A pair of sailors arguing quietly over tides in some harbour far from here. a woman mending gloves beside the candlelight with swift practiced motions. Two children sharing a blanket near the hearth, while their mother dozes sitting upright. Travel in the medieval world rarely happens alone unless forced. Roads remain uncertain places after sunset. Wolves still wander some forests. Bridges collapse. Bandits watch river crossings. Fever spreads quietly through crowded towns. One wrong turn beneath winter snow may simply erase a traveller from memory altogether. And so people cluster together at inns not merely for shelter, but for reassurance. Human voices mean survival. The rebec player changes tune. This one lighter. A few men attempt singing before immediately discovering they should not. The innkeeper tolerates exactly half a verse before pointing sternly toward quieter behavior. Save the heroic ballads for daylight, he mutters. Some people here hope to sleep before dying. The room approves. You finish the last of your eel while a servant refills your cup from a heavy pitcher. Foam spills across the rim onto your fingers. The ale tastes smoky and faintly sour, but warm. Beside the fire, the old chestnut woman suddenly leans toward a nervous young traveller and presses something into his palm. A small charm. You glimpse rowan berries tied with red thread. For bad dreams, she says. The traveller accepts it seriously. People trust charms deeply here. Rowan wood against evil spirits. Iron nails above doors. St. medallions sewn into clothing. Dried fox teeth for luck during childbirth. Tiny bells hung in stables to frighten wandering demons. Medieval life contains dangers no one fully understands, so people prepare for unseen troubles as best they can. Honestly, modern people still do this too, only now the charms are productivity apps and vitamin supplements. Rain intensifies outside. You hear it hammering rooftops and overflowing gutters into the street beyond the shutters. The stable door bangs once in the yard before someone curses and secures it again. A draught slips through cracks in the wall carrying smells from outdoors wet hay. Manure, horse breath steaming in darkness. The pilgrim beside you stretches stiff legs. Best part of an inn, he says quietly, is hearing weather from inside instead of outside. You cannot argue with that wisdom. The innkeeper moves table to table, now collecting final payments for food and drink before the hour grows too late. He keeps tallies in chalk upon a narrow wooden board worn smooth by decades of use. No one can quite agree whether medieval innkeepers possess exceptional memories or simply terrifying patience regarding unpaid debts. Probably both. Near the entrance hangs a cluster of iron lanterns ready for emergencies. Beneath them rests a bucket of sand beside the hearth. Fire terrifies medieval towns. One spark beneath dry beams can erase entire streets before dawn. Inns especially remain vulnerable. Candles, rushes, smoking hearths, drunken guests, overturned lamps. Most travellers sleep lightly, partly because they fear thieves, and partly because they fear waking inside a burning building. A thick-set merchant near the wall mutters a short prayer each time sparks crackle too loudly. The musician finishes another tune. Outside, the abbey bell tolls once more through rain and darkness. Late now. The servant girl begins clearing trenches while sleepy travellers negotiate sleeping spaces with growing seriousness. Benches near the fire become valuable territory. Upper rooms are discussed like distant kingdoms few can afford. One exhausted carter offers extra coin for clean blankets and receives laughter in response so immediate and sincere that even he starts smiling. Then the innkeeper lifts his voice above the room. Last ale before shutters bar. A groan rises from several tables, and slowly, like a great animal preparing for sleep, the inn begins settling into the deeper hours of night. The inn changes once the final ale is called. Not suddenly, not dramatically. The transformation moves slowly through the common room like embers settling beneath ash. Voices soften, tankards empty more thoughtfully. Travellers begin protecting what belongs to them with the weary caution of people who know morning thefts are easier than midnight confrontations. You notice purses tucked beneath cloaks, boots pulled closer to benches, walking staffs hooked carefully through belts before sleep. One merchant actually ties his money pouch into his beard, which feels ambitious from both the security and grooming perspective. The innkeeper moves steadily between tables carrying a squat beeswax candle mounted on a wooden tray. Its light flickers warmly across faces worn by road dust and cold weather. He pauses beside each group to settle accounts with practiced calm. "No argument tomorrow," he says to a pair of drovers counting coins too slowly. Morning memory grows generous. That because of ale? That because travellers become poets overnight? Every man claims he paid double once the sun rises. The drovers grumble, but hand over the proper amount anyway. You finish the last of your bread while the servant girl clears trenchers stacked greasy with eel bones and onion scraps. The smell of supper still hangs thick in the air. Smoked fish, pottage, garlic, wet wool steaming near the hearth. A comforting heaviness settles into the room now. Not comfort exactly. More the shared exhaustion of people who have survived another day on medieval roads and reached walls before darkness swallowed the countryside whole. At the next table, the pilgrim carefully unwraps a small cloth bundle. Inside rests a little wooden relic case carved with faded crosses. Several nearby travellers glance over immediately. Relics always attract attention. Some swear a saint's finger bone can cure fever. Others believe touching certain relics protects against storms, illness, wolves, or sudden death. Entire pilgrimages form around fragments of cloth, splinters of wood, tiny bones, or drops of preserved oil. Of course, there are also enough suspicious relics travelling Europe to suggest every saint possessed at least 3 skeletons. The pilgrim notices your curiosity. "Saint Odric," he says quietly, or part of him. "Which part?" "Depends who sold it." "You nearly choke on your ale?" Even the pilgrim smiles faintly at that. Across the room, the rebec player packs away his instrument while a servant extinguishes 2 smaller candles to save wax. Beeswax costs dearly. Tallow candles are cheaper but smell terrible when burning, like old grease having regrets. Tonight the inn uses both. The combined scent drifts through smoke-dark rafters, while shadows stretch longer against the walls. You begin noticing how old the building truly is. The floor slopes unevenly beneath benches worn smooth by generations of boots. Oak beams twist slightly overhead from centuries of settling. Near the hearth, one stone carries scorch marks so ancient they have become part of the inn itself. Those who tell the tale never fully agree how old the Boar and Lantern really is. Some claim it once served Norman soldiers generations ago. Others insist monks brewed ale here before the town walls even existed. The innkeeper probably knows the truth and charges extra for hearing it. A sleepy hound rises from beside the door and circles twice before collapsing nearer the fire. One ear twitches constantly as though guarding the room even while asleep. Animals matter enormously in inns. Dogs warn against thieves. Cats hunt mice in grain stores. Horses determine whether merchants reach market alive. A sick mule can ruin an entire journey faster than bad weather. You glance toward the shuttered windows where rain still whispers against the wood. Somewhere beyond them lies the stable yard with its lantern glow and steaming horses shifting beneath damp blankets. The thought of cold air alone makes you lean closer to the fire. Nearby, the old chestnut woman suddenly snaps her fingers toward a young servant. "Salt!" she says sharply. The servant hurries to sprinkle a pinch near the doorway threshold. You raise an eyebrow. The pilgrim notices. Bad luck to leave doors unsalted during storms, he explains. Some swear wandering spirits follow rainwater indoors. Does salt stop them? Perhaps. Or perhaps it reminds people they tried. That feels surprisingly honest. The innkeeper now begins assigning sleeping spaces with the solemn authority of a battlefield commander. Merchant upstairs, pilgrims near hearth, carters by rear wall, no boots near fire. Last man who dried boots there nearly smoked us all into heaven. A few weary chuckles answer him. Upper rooms go first to wealthier guests or travellers carrying delicate goods. Everyone else negotiates for benches, pallets, loft spaces, or floor corners. Privacy barely exists. Warmth matters more. You watch two traders quietly debate whether sharing a blanket is less embarrassing than freezing separately. Winter economics make philosophers of everyone. The servant girl returns carrying folded wool blankets smelling faintly of lavender and old smoke. She hands one to you without ceremony. Watch for fleas, she says. Thank you. They like warm travellers. You appreciate the warning even if it arrives too late emotionally. Medieval inns battle fleas constantly. Rushes, straw bedding, wool blankets, damp clothing, animals nearby perfect conditions for tiny biting kingdoms. Some people carry sachets of mint or wormwood, believing strong herbs repel pests. Others simply scratch quietly and accept fate. A group of sailors near the wall begin muttering prayers before sleep. One kisses a small iron cross hanging around his neck. Another touches the wooden table 3 times for luck. Night magnifies superstition. During daylight, roads feel practical. Mud, tolls, weather, blisters. But once darkness arrives, forests become places of whispers. Marshes conceal strange lights. Empty crossroads gather old stories. Every unexplained sound feels larger beneath moonless skies. Even inside inns, people remain careful. The shutters are barred firmly now. Heavy oak beams secure the door. The innkeeper checks each fastening personally, while one servant banks the hearth fire lower for the night. No one enters after this, and no one leaves willingly either. You stretch your legs toward the fading warmth while conversation finally quiets into scattered murmurs. Rainwater drips steadily from cloaks hanging near the wall. Someone snores already. A child coughs softly upstairs before falling silent again. The room glows dimly amber beneath its remaining candles. The pilgrim beside you removes muddy boots with a sigh, powerful enough to suggest spiritual liberation. You ever notice, he mutters, how every inn smells different? You think about it. This one smells of smoke, damp straw, onions, wool, old timber, horse leather, chestnuts, and river rain. Another town tomorrow would smell entirely different. Yet somehow all inns also smell vaguely alike, like weary survival shared beneath one roof. The old woman near the hearth crosses herself suddenly while staring toward the rafters. Even now, it is hard to tell whether she hears mice moving overhead or remembers some older story attached to this place. Outside, thunder rolls faintly beyond the river. Inside, travellers settle deeper beneath blankets and cloaks while the fire sinks lower into glowing red embers. The inn breathes slowly around you now, and night stretches long ahead. The deeper hours arrive quietly. One by one, conversations fade into murmurs, then into breathing, coughing, shifting blankets, and the occasional sleepy complaint from somebody discovering exactly how hard medieval benches truly are. The fire settles lower in the hearth, its glow pulsing gently across the common room like a tired heartbeat. You wrap the wool blanket tighter around your shoulders and attempt to arrange yourself comfortably upon the narrow bench near the hearth. This proves optimistic. The wood beneath you has all the softness of a church pew carved by an angry carpenter. Somewhere near your knees, a splinter threatens negotiations. The blanket smells faintly of smoke, lavender, wet dog, and centuries of accumulated traveller despair. Still, it is warmer than outside, and warmth decides most arguments in the medieval world. Around you, the sleeping arrangements reveal themselves fully now. A pair of merchants occupy a pallet stuffed with straw beside the wall, each clutching his purse even in sleep. Two pilgrims lie near the embers, wrapped head to foot like bundled laundry. One sailor snores loud enough to suggest either deep exhaustion or minor demonic possession. The innkeeper passes through carrying a final candle, checking doors and shutters once more. Iron keys rattle softly against his belt. "Wake me if the roof catches fire," he mutters toward nobody in particular. Comforting thought before sleep, someone replies from the darkness. The innkeeper shrugs. "If it burns, at least you'll already be warm." A few groans answer him. Then the candle disappears into a rear chamber, leaving the common room lit mostly by embers and weak moonlight leaking through cracks in the shutters. You lie still listening. This becomes the true nighttime sound of a medieval inn. Breathing, rustling straw, rain dripping from eaves outside, horses stamping softly in the stable yard, wind brushing the roof, distant monastery bells marking the hours no one truly wishes to count. Somewhere overhead, floorboards creak. Upper rooms! The fortunate guests above possess actual beds, though fortunate remains relative. Medieval beds are often shared by strangers unless coin buys privacy. Mattresses contain straw, feathers if lucky, lumps if not. Curtains help block drafts. Sometimes they also help trap smells with terrifying efficiency. No one can quite agree whether upper chambers are worth the cost. The sailor nearest the hearth suddenly rolls over and scratches furiously beneath his blanket. Yes, the fleas. You had nearly forgotten them. The fleas had not forgotten you. Tiny invisible kingdoms thrive within wool bedding, rushes, cloaks, and straw mattresses. Inns fight them constantly with herbs, smoke, lavender oils, and prayers carrying roughly equal success rates. You feel something crawl near your ankle and decide not to investigate further for the sake of emotional stability. The old chestnut woman still sits awake near the dying fire. How she remains awake after midnight nobody understands. Perhaps she naps during daylight like the cat curled in her lap. Perhaps old age simply teaches people to sleep in fragments. She pokes gently at the embers with an iron rod while muttering to herself. Or praying, or both. Even now, it is hard to tell whether she watches over the inn or merely refuses to trust sleep entirely. A cold draught slips beneath the shutters, carrying river mist indoors. Several travellers instinctively pull blankets tighter. Winter nights remain dangerous things. Before proper glass windows, before insulated walls, before reliable heating, darkness and cold creep constantly through cracks and seams. People sleep wearing layers. Hats stay on indoors. Cloaks become blankets. Dogs and even livestock sometimes share indoor spaces simply because living bodies create warmth. The pilgrim beside the hearth shifts suddenly and whispers something half asleep. Perhaps a prayer. Pilgrims often recite saint names before sleeping in unfamiliar places. St. Christopher for roads, St. Julian for hospitality, St. Roch against plague. Medieval people move through life surrounded by invisible protections they hope are listening. You stare toward the rafters where smoke drifts in faint silver layers above the room. The beams disappear into darkness overhead. Ancient oak, soot-blackened and cracked. Somewhere up there mice scratch softly between thatch and timber. Then comes another sound, a slow scrape, near the rear wall. Several people stir immediately. The dog lifts its head. The room holds still. A merchant mutters, "Rats." Someone else whispers, "Too heavy." The scrape comes again, slow, wooden, dragging. You feel every traveller quietly listening now without moving. Night inside an inn sharpens imagination. Ordinary noises grow teeth in darkness. Finally, the innkeeper's voice erupts from somewhere unseen. "If that's you, Thomas, stop stealing turnips from the kitchen again." A pause. Then a young servant's embarrassed voice answers from the rear pantry. "I dropped the basket." The entire room exhales together. Soft laughter rolls through the darkness. The dog sighs and goes back to sleep. You cannot help smiling beneath your blanket. Fear comes easily after midnight, especially when roads, forests, sickness, thieves, storms, and old superstitions already occupy half the mind. Some swear spirits wander inns after dark searching for lonely travellers. Others insist certain crossroad spirits follow guests indoors unless hearth fires remain burning all night. One Welsh merchant once claimed he saw a ghostly monk drinking ale in silence beside a doorway before vanishing at dawn. Though considering the quality of medieval ale, visions are not entirely impossible. The rain finally begins easing outside. You hear water dripping steadily from gutters into muddy streets below, somewhere beyond the town walls. The river moves unseen through darkness. A horse snorts in the stable yard. Then, from very far away, comes the faint sound of wolves, or perhaps dogs. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. The sound fades quickly anyway. Sleep approaches slowly in places like this, not all at once, more like sinking beneath heavy blankets of sound and warmth and exhaustion. Your body still remembers the road. The ache in your shoulders from carrying wet gear, the sting of cold fingers thawing too quickly beside fire, the endless rhythm of boots through mud. Around you, travellers settle deeper into dreams. A merchant snores softly into his beard purse. One pilgrim clutches his relic case while sleeping. The sailor near the hearth mutters something about tides. Upstairs, someone coughs twice and falls silent again. The old woman finally rises from her chair with visible effort. She places one last piece of wood onto the embers, whispers a blessing toward the hearth, then disappears into darkness with her cat following close behind. Only the embers remain now. Red, gold, fading lower. You close your eyes at last while the medieval inn creaks gently around you like an old ship surviving another winter night. And somewhere beyond sleep, the bells continue marking time until morning comes. At some uncertain hour deep in the night, you wake. Not fully at first, just enough to notice the cold. The fire has sunk into low red embers, and the warmth that once filled the common room now clings only close to the hearth itself. Beyond that small circle, darkness stretches thick between the benches and walls. The rain has stopped. In its place comes the faint hiss of wind slipping beneath shutters and along the roof beams overhead. Someone nearby snores with astonishing commitment. Another traveller coughs into a blanket. You shift carefully on the hard bench, trying not to wake the pilgrim sleeping beside the embers. Your back protests immediately. Medieval furniture rarely concerns itself with spinal kindness. Then you hear it, a horse stamping hard outside. Another answers. Voices follow from the stable yard beyond the rear door, low, hurried. The dog near the hearth lifts its head again. Curiosity pulls you upright beneath your blanket. Around the room, most travellers remain asleep, though one merchant cracks open an eye briefly before deciding any nighttime problem involving horses is probably someone else's tragedy. Reasonable thinking, honestly. You pull your cloak around your shoulders and move quietly across the common room. The rushes whisper beneath your boots. Somewhere near the wall, somebody has rolled halfway off a pallet and continues sleeping anyway. At the rear of the inn, a narrow wooden door leaks lantern light through its edges. Cold air rushes in the moment you open it. The stable yard lies silver beneath thin moonlight breaking through clouds at last. Rainwater glistens across churned mud. Lanterns sway from hooks beside the stable entrance, while horses shift restlessly inside. The smell hits immediately. Wet hay, manure, leather tack, damp wood, horse sweat steaming in cold air. Not pleasant exactly, but deeply alive. You cross the yard carefully, avoiding puddles large enough to qualify as minor lakes. From inside the stable comes the sound of muttered voices and animals rustling against stalls. The older drover from earlier stands near the entrance, tightening a strap beneath a mule's harness. Beside him, the younger boy rubs down a nervous horse with handfuls of straw. She kicked the stall door half apart, the drover mutters without looking up. Storm unsettled her. You glance toward the horse. Its breath curls white into the lantern glow while its ears twitch nervously. Animals sense weather strangely well. Some swear horses also sense spirits, earthquakes, death, and dishonest tax collectors. Medieval people trust animal instincts more readily than human judgment in many matters. The stable itself stretches long and low beneath heavy timber beams. Lantern light flickers across rows of stalls packed tightly with horses, mules, and two deeply unimpressed oxen chewing hay with slow, philosophical sadness. Bundles of straw line the floor. Harnesses hang from pegs beside iron tools and leather reins darkened by years of handling. Somewhere overhead, pigeons rustle among rafters. And hanging beside the stable entrance, tied with faded red ribbon, you notice a little cluster of dried herbs. Juniper, rowan twigs, garlic. Protective charms. Against witches, you ask quietly. The younger stable boy glances up. Against sickness, mostly, he says, and fire, and bad luck. That covers nearly everything. He shrugs. Exactly. The drover spits thoughtfully into the straw. Some swear stable spirits tangle reins at night if horses are left unblessed. You nod as though this feels entirely reasonable. Truthfully, after enough hours travelling medieval roads, even strange beliefs begin sounding practical. When illness appears suddenly and storms ruin harvests and wolves drag livestock into forests, people prefer explanations over emptiness. Inside the stable, warmth gathers differently than inside the inn. Not cleaner, certainly not sweeter, but alive with animal heat. The horses breathe heavily in darkness while their hooves shift against packed earth. Leather creaks softly. Chains clink. One mule stares at you with open suspicion, which somehow feels deserved. Near the rear stalls, an old stable hand sits upon an overturned barrel mending tack by lantern light. His fingers move slowly but expertly through worn leather straps. He glances toward you once. Can't sleep either. Bench fighting back. Ah, first night. You nod. He chuckles quietly. Floors softer sometimes. Not encouraging. The stable hand gestures toward a little iron charm nailed above one stall door. At first glance it resembles a crooked horseshoe wrapped with tiny bells. Old custom, he says, keeps nightmares from riding the horses. No one can quite agree whether it works. That never stopped anyone hanging them. Fair point. A draught slips through cracks in the stable walls carrying scents from the river beyond town. Cold reeds. Wet earth. Frost beginning somewhere distant in the fields. The boy beside the nervous horse suddenly reaches into his pocket and pulls out a crust of bread sprinkled with salt. For luck, he explains before feeding it carefully to the animal. Salt appears everywhere in medieval superstition, scattered at thresholds, tossed into fires, carried in pouches, mixed into charms, valuable enough to preserve food, rare enough to feel powerful. Some medieval people even believe spilling salt invites arguments before sunrise. Considering life inside crowded inns, they may not be wrong. From the town beyond the stable walls comes the faint sound of late footsteps splashing through muddy streets. Perhaps a watchman. Perhaps some unfortunate soul still searching for shelter after curfew. The abbey bell tolls once. Very late now. Inside the stable, the horses finally begin calming, their movements slow. Steam drifts lazily upward into lantern glow. The nervous mare lowers her head while the stable boy strokes her neck gently. You realize then how much work continues after travellers fall asleep. Servants banking fires, stable hands calming frightened animals, kitchen boys scrubbing pots in freezing water, watchmen pacing walls above the gates, bakers already preparing dawn bread somewhere in dark workshops nearby. Medieval nights are never truly still. They simply grow quieter. The old stable hand finishes repairing the leather strap and squints toward the sky visible through gaps above the stable doors. "Clear morning tomorrow," he murmurs. "How can you tell? Cold smells different after rain." You're too tired to question this wisdom properly. The dog from the inn suddenly wanders into the stable yard, circles once near your boots, then settles directly atop a dry patch of straw as though he owns the property outright, which perhaps he does spiritually. You pull your cloak tighter against the cold and glance back toward the inn windows glowing dim amber through the darkness. Smoke drifts lazily upward from the chimney into the clearing sky. A small island of warmth beneath endless night. And for travellers like you, that is enough. You remain in the stable a while longer simply because returning to the hard bench inside the inn feels less appealing than standing beside warm horses in the cold. This stable hand continues working silently beneath lantern light, while the younger boy finally settles the nervous mare with slow strokes along her neck. Around you, the animals breathe in deep, steady rhythms that somehow calm the night itself. There is something strangely peaceful about stables after midnight. Not clean peace, certainly not quiet peace, but a living kind of peace made from warm bodies, hay dust drifting through lantern glow, leather creaking softly, and the reassuring certainty that dawn will eventually come because horses always seem to expect it. The old hand glances toward you again. "Pilgrims arriving tomorrow," he mutters. "How can you tell? Roads get noisy before feast days." This answer arrives with such confidence that you almost believe roads themselves make decisions. He gestures toward a row of small metal badges hanging from a peg beside the stable entrance. Shells, crosses, tiny stamped saints, bits of tarnished pewter tied together with twine. Left behind over the years, he explains. Pilgrims lose everything eventually. You step closer. Each badge carries scratches from long journeys, one shaped like a scallop shell from Western shrines, another stamped with a saint holding keys, tiny souvenirs of muddy roads and aching feet. Pilgrims pass constantly through medieval inns. Some travel seeking miracles, some perform penance ordered by priests or courts. Others simply want movement, purpose, stories, or escape from lives grown too narrow. And inns become crossroads for all of them. No one can quite agree whether pilgrims are holy travellers or just ordinary people with better stories. Probably both. A sudden gust rattles the stable doors. The mule nearest you flattens its ears dramatically as though personally offended by weather itself. The younger boy laughs softly. That one hates wind. What happens if there's a storm? She hates storms louder. Reasonable. You decide at last to return indoors before the cold settles permanently into your bones. Crossing the muddy yard again. You notice frost beginning along the edges of puddles where clouds have finally cleared. Winter tightening its grip. The rear-end door creaks open reluctantly beneath your hand. Inside, the common room feels darker than before. Only a few embers glow within the hearth now, casting low red light across sleeping travellers bundled beneath cloaks and blankets. Smoke lingers close beneath the rafters. The air smells thicker somehow after midnight stale ale. Extinguished candles, damp wool, old rushes, sleeping bodies. The smell of survival packed closely together. You settle back onto your bench carefully. The pilgrim beside the hearth stirs as you pull the blanket around yourself again. Still raining, he whispers sleepily, "Stopped. Good." A pause. Then he adds, half dreaming already, "Roads lie less when frozen." You're too tired to unpack whatever wisdom that contains. Near the wall, one merchant talks quietly in his sleep. Something about geese. Another traveller scratches furiously beneath his blanket before sighing in defeat. Upstairs, faint footsteps cross the floorboards overhead, followed by the dull thump of a door closing. Perhaps someone visiting the privy chamber. Perhaps ghosts. At this hour, medieval architecture sounds suspicious no matter the explanation. You close your eyes again, and slowly the inn drifts around you. Time loosens strangely during these deep night hours. Sleep comes in fragments between noises, a cough, hooves outside, a servant passing briefly with fresh wood for the embers, bells tolling somewhere beyond dreams. Then another sound reaches you. Soft voices. You open your eyes slightly. Near the hearth, two pilgrims sit awake beneath cloaks, speaking quietly while the room sleeps around them. Their faces glow amber in the low firelight. One older, one young enough that road dust still looks unfamiliar upon him. Between them rests a little cloth bundle filled with pilgrim badges and tiny relic tokens. The older man notices you awake and offers a tired nod. "Couldn't sleep. Bench disagrees with me." "That happens." The younger pilgrim pokes gently at the embers. "Storm flooded the lower bridge," he murmurs. "We nearly turned back." "But didn't." The older man shakes his head slowly. "People rarely turn back once pilgrimage begins." His voice carries the certainty of someone who has walked many roads. You shift closer to the warmth while they continue speaking softly. They tell stories the way travellers often do after midnight, not loudly, not performatively, but almost like confessions offered to darkness itself. Shrines hidden deep in forests. Monastery guest houses where bells ring before dawn so cold it hurts to breathe. Roads lined with tiny offerings left beside saints' statues. Villages where people nail herbs above doors against plague winds. One chapel where sick travellers sleep beneath a stone believed to cure fever. Did it work, you ask? The younger pilgrim shrugs. Some swear that it does. And others, they die anyway. The honesty lands gently in the quiet room. Medieval faith rarely promises certainty. It simply gives people rituals sturdy enough to hold while uncertainty continues all around them. The older pilgrim unwraps a crust of coarse bread and shares pieces silently. You eat slowly near the fading embers while the inn creaks softly around you. Outside, frost thickens over the town. You can almost feel it gathering on rooftops and empty carts and muddy streets beyond the shutters. The younger pilgrim reaches beneath his cloak and pulls free a tiny beeswax candle no longer than your thumb. He lights it carefully from the hearth. "For St. Julian," he says, "patron saint of travellers." The little flame flickers between you. No one can quite agree whether small acts like this truly protect weary travellers on dangerous roads. Yet people keep lighting candles anyway, tiny flames against enormous darkness. Perhaps that is the point. The older pilgrim notices the dog sleeping beside the hearth. Same hound followed us from the eastern road, he murmurs. You certain? He steals food with remarkable consistency. The dog opens one eye briefly, entirely unashamed. A faint smile passes through the room. The candle burns low while the pilgrims speak quietly of roads farther west. Frozen fields, abbey bells heard across morning fog. A village where every innkeeper supposedly hangs wolf teeth above stable doors against evil spirits. Does it help, you ask? The older pilgrim pulls his blanket tighter. Depends whether the spirits are wolves. At last, exhaustion settles fully over you again. The voices beside the hearth blur softer. The embers dim lower. The little candle before St. Julian flickers once in the draught and goes dark. And surrounded by strangers breathing quietly beneath smoke-black rafters, you drift back towards sleep while the medieval night keeps watch beyond the walls. By the time you wake again, the inn has changed once more. Not quieter, louder. The deeper part of night has arrived, that strange middle ground after proper sleep should have begun, yet before dawn even considers appearing. In many inns this becomes the most restless hour of all. Those who intended to sleep cannot. Those who drank too much refuse to. And those who work through darkness continue moving like ghosts between both worlds. You open your eyes to firelight brighter than before. Someone has fed the hearth again. The common room glows amber beneath fresh flames while shadows sway across rafters thick with smoke. A few travellers still sleep bundled near the walls, but others have risen. Tankards reappear, boots stomp softly. The inn breathes awake again in smaller, stranger ways. Near the far tables, the sailors have resumed drinking. This explains much already. One of them sings under his breath while another rattles dice inside a wooden cup. A pair of carters lean over a barrel discussing roads in low, urgent voices. Somewhere nearby, somebody is roasting onions again, which feels either comforting or deeply irresponsible at this hour. The smell of ale thickens through the room. You push yourself upright carefully, your back reminding you that medieval travel builds character mostly by damaging posture. The pilgrim beside the hearth still sleeps beneath his cloak, though one hand remains wrapped protectively around the relic case even in dreams. Nearby, the merchant with the beard purse snores on with heroic determination. The dog, meanwhile, has somehow acquired half a sausage from unknown sources. Honestly, you respect the professionalism. You stretch stiff legs toward the fire while watching the room shift around you. Midnight inns possess a different personality from evening inns. Earlier there had been warmth and arrival and weary relief. Now comes caution loosened by drink. Stories grow exaggerated, arguments hover nearer the surface, laughter arrives too quickly or not at all. At the far side of the hall the rebec player has returned. This time the music sounds rougher, slower. Not songs for performance anymore, but tunes built to keep tired people company through sleepless hours. The innkeeper stands nearby polishing cups with a cloth that may once have been cleaned several rains ago. His eyes move constantly across the room, tracking every raised voice and unsteady gesture. After dark, innkeepers become part host, part judge, part night watchman. A sailor slams dice onto the barrel. Loaded, accuses the carter beside him immediately. You lost. Because they're loaded. That's still losing. The argument pauses while everyone considers this unpleasantly fair logic. The innkeeper finally speaks without even looking over. If anybody bleeds indoors, I charge double. Peace returns remarkably quickly after that. You accept a fresh cup of ale from a passing servant who looks too tired even for conversation now. Her hair escapes entirely from beneath her linen cap. Lavender still hangs from her belt pouch, though tonight it battles bravely against stronger smells. Around you, conversations drift strangely through the smoke. One sailor describes sea storms beyond the northern coast, where waves supposedly swallow entire ships without trace. A wool trader insists monastery wine cures tooth pain better than any physician. A carter swears he once saw corpse lights floating above marshland after midnight. Spirits, he whispers. Marsh gas, mutters the scribe from earlier. The carter squints suspiciously. You say that like it improves matters. A few people nod thoughtfully at this. Even now, it is hard to tell whether medieval people fear ghosts because they believe in them completely, or because darkness leaves too much room not to. The inn door suddenly rattles. Every head turns. 3 hard knocks follow from outside. The room stills instantly. That's the thing about inns after curfew. Once shutters are barred and doors secured, unexpected knocking becomes everyone's business. The innkeeper sets down his cup slowly. Another knock. The sailors reach casually toward belts where knives hang. Not threatening yet, just prepared. Travellers on medieval roads learn caution quickly. The innkeeper lifts the crossbar enough to crack open the heavy oak door. Cold air spills inside, carrying frost and river fog. A cloaked figure stands outside beneath lantern light. For one strange moment, nobody speaks. Then the figure lowers its hood, revealing merely an elderly friar soaked nearly through with rainwater and shivering hard enough to rattle teeth. The room exhales together. "Saints preserve us," mutters one sailor. "Thought you were tax collectors." The friar looks genuinely offended. "I'd rather freeze outside." Fair again. The innkeeper allows him in immediately. Even rough-inns rarely refuse clergy shelter during winter nights. Bad luck, for one thing. Also, priests talk. And priests who talk badly about your inn can empty tables remarkably fast. The friar thanks everyone with exhausted politeness while stamping mud from his sandals near the hearth. Steam rises from his soaked robes. A servant brings him onion broth and bread without being asked. Monasteries and inns exist in curious partnership throughout the medieval world. Monks rely on travellers for news. Travellers rely on monasteries for shelter, medicine, maps, and prayers. Between them flows an endless exchange of gossip, blessings, and terrible soup. The friar settles near the fire with a sigh almost holy in its relief. No rooms left west of the river, he murmurs, every guest house full. Pilgrims ask the innkeeper, "And traders, do you feast day market tomorrow?" That explains the crowded benches, the late arrivals, the restless energy humming beneath the room tonight. You sip slowly from your ale while frost gathers quietly outside. The friar notices the pilgrim badges near the hearth and smiles faintly. "Road's busy this season." "Roads are always busy," says the scribe. "Not with honest people." That earns tired laughter throughout the room. A sailor begins another song before immediately forgetting half the words. The rebec player rescues the melody awkwardly. Someone throws walnut shells into the fire where they crack sharply among embers. Then from somewhere upstairs comes the sound of raised voices. Not shouting exactly, but tense enough that the room notices. The innkeeper closes his eyes briefly, like a man greeting an old enemy. "Of course," he mutters, because no medieval inn after midnight remains peaceful for long. The voices upstairs sharpen just enough to cut through the music below. Not a fight yet, but close enough that every traveller in the common room pauses to listen. The innkeeper sighs with the exhausted patience of a man who has spent decades untangling nighttime disputes involving ale, blankets, gambling, missing boots, and occasionally goats. He reaches for a lantern hanging beside the hearth and starts toward the staircase at the rear of the hall. "If anyone dies," he mutters over his shoulder, "do it quietly." One sailor raises his cup in solemn agreement. The staircase creaks beneath the innkeeper's boots as he disappears upward. The common room waits. Even the rebec player stops plucking strings. You glance toward the upper landing where shadows shift behind the railing. A door slams once. Somebody curses softly. Then silence. The sort of silence that somehow feels louder than shouting. A moment later, the innkeeper's voice rumbles overhead. No knives indoors. A pause. And no throwing chamber pots either. Another pause. Especially full ones. The room downstairs collectively winces. Medieval inns teach many valuable lessons. One of them is never standing beneath upper windows after midnight. The tension breaks into scattered laughter while conversation slowly resumes. Tankards lift again. Dice rattle once more across the barrel table. The friar near the fire continues eating onion broth with the focused gratitude of a man rescued from freezing rain. But something in the room has changed now. You notice it gradually. Eyes turning toward the far wall, toward the stranger sitting alone beneath the darkest beam in the hall. You are almost certain he was not there earlier. Or perhaps you simply failed to notice him. The man sits wrapped in a dark wool cloak travel-stained with road mud. His hood remains lowered despite the warmth. A leather satchel rests beside his boots, one hand placed lightly atop it at all times. Before him sits untouched ale. No one speaks to him, and he speaks to no one. The sailors glance his way occasionally. The merchants do too. Even the dog near the hearth lifted its head briefly upon noticing him before settling again. You lean slightly toward the scribe seated nearby. Know him. The scribe barely looks up from his cup. No, not especially reassuring. The rebec player resumes softly, though quieter now. Shadows drift across the stranger's hood while firelight flickers against the silver clasp fastening his cloak. A messenger, perhaps? Or a monk? Or a tax collector disguised badly as something else? Those who tell the tale never fully agree what sort of traveller unsettles an inn most deeply. Some fear armed soldiers, others distrust silent merchants, but there is always something unnerving about a lone traveller who arrives late, speaks little, and watches more than he drinks. The friar near the hearth notices your attention. Been here an hour at least, he whispers. Never touched his ale. That's suspicious. In this room, very... Fair point. A sailor eventually attempts friendliness from across the hall. You travel north or south? The stranger lifts his eyes briefly beneath the hood. West. His voice sounds calm, educated perhaps, hard to place. Roads safe. They exist. The sailor stares a moment before bursting into tired laughter. Well spoken. But the stranger offers nothing further. You study him carefully now. His boots are good leather but worn heavily from travel. Mud cakes the hem of his cloak. One glove bears faint ink stains near the thumb. Interesting. The scribe notices you noticing. Messenger, maybe, he murmurs, or monastery courier. No sword. Smart couriers hide wealth better than swords. The innkeeper finally returns downstairs carrying his lantern. Problem solved, asks one merchant hopefully. Depends whether they throw anything else tonight. This does not sound entirely solved. He notices the room's attention drifting toward the stranger but says nothing. That alone feels telling somehow. Innkeepers survive partly by recognizing which questions should remain unasked. Outside, wind brushes softly against the shutters while frost whitens the town beneath clearing skies. Somewhere beyond the walls a watch bell rings twice. Very late now. The common room settles into quieter rhythms again. Several travellers finally surrender fully to sleep despite the noise. One sailor curls beneath the table using a sack of turnips as a pillow. The dog steals another sausage from somewhere morally uncertain. Near the hearth, the friar warms stiff fingers over the fire. Strange roads this winter, he murmurs quietly to nobody specific. The pilgrim beside the embers opens one eye. They're always strange, stranger than usual. That catches attention. Even the sailors glance over. The friar lowers his voice slightly. Village east of the marsh says travellers disappeared near the old shrine road. A carter snorts immediately. Travellers disappear everywhere. Yes, says the friar calmly. But usually they leave wagons behind. Silence settles briefly. The rebec player misses a note. No one can quite agree whether medieval people truly believe every roadside story they hear, yet nobody ignores them either. Roads already contain enough danger without adding legends carelessly. The sailor beneath the table mutters, bandits. Maybe, says the friar. Or marsh fever, suggests the scribe. Or tax collectors, adds another sailor darkly. This earns more laughter than the joke deserves. The stranger by the wall finally lifts his untouched cup and drinks once. His eyes remain lowered afterward. You notice then the little silver badge pinned beneath his cloak clasp. Not noble, not military, a monastery seal, perhaps, or something close. The innkeeper notices too. His expression changes slightly before smoothing again. Interesting. The old chestnut woman appears suddenly from some hidden rear chamber carrying fresh wood for the hearth. She glances once toward the stranger and quietly crosses herself before feeding logs into the fire. Even now, it is hard to tell whether old women know more than everyone else or merely suspect more confidently. Flames leap higher. Light spills across the room brighter now, illuminating smoke drifting beneath rafters and the exhausted faces gathered below them. Travellers between destinations. Strangers sharing warmth for one fragile winter night. The stranger rises at last. Every conversation lowers instinctively. He lifts the satchel carefully, nods once toward the innkeeper, then starts toward the staircase without another word. The hood shifts slightly as he passes the hearth. Enough for you to glimpse a narrow scar crossing one cheek and the edge of a wax seal hanging from a cord beneath his cloak. Official business. Dangerous business, perhaps. The innkeeper watches him disappear upstairs before muttering softly into his beard. Saints help whoever sent that man travelling tonight. Then he notices everyone staring. What? No one answers. Outside, frost thickens over the silent town while the bells continue counting away the final hours before dawn. After the stranger disappears upstairs, the inn seems to breathe differently. Not frightened exactly, just more alert. Travellers return to their cups and blankets, yet conversations remain softer now, drifting close to the fire instead of across the room. Midnight has fully settled over the boar and lantern, the hour when shadows lengthen, patience thins, and every creak in an old building begins sounding personal. The innkeeper moves toward the door once more, carrying his lantern high. Bar time properly now, he announces. Several sailors groan like condemned men. You've had enough ale to survive winter twice over, he tells them. One more cup for warmth. You're already discussing philosophy with the turnip sack. The sailor beneath the table raises a finger weakly. The sack understands me. Sleep before it starts answering. The room chuckles softly while the innkeeper secures the final crossbar into place with a heavy wooden thud. That sound matters. Once the doors are barred for the true night hours, the inn becomes its own little world sealed against darkness outside. No more travellers arriving, or no more business. Only those already inside together until dawn unlocks the roads again. The friar near the hearth finishes his broth and quietly recites evening prayers beneath his breath. A merchant beside him fingers a tiny saint medal hanging round his neck while pretending not to listen. People become more devout at night, especially during winter. The fire pops sharply, scattering sparks upward. Instantly, the servant girl appears with a bucket of sand kept beside the hearth and scatters a careful handful near the stones. Every inn fears fire more than thieves. Thieves steal purses. Fire steals entire towns. You glance upward toward the soot-black rafters where shadows drift like smoke itself. Oak beams creak softly as cold settles deeper outside. Somewhere overhead, footsteps cross again in the upper rooms. Then silence. Perhaps the stranger settling in at last. Perhaps someone checking that their purse remains where they hid it beneath straw bedding. No one truly relaxes in medieval inns. They merely grow tired enough to pause, worrying temporarily. The old chestnut woman returns to her chair near the hearth with the cat curled immediately into her lap again. She studies the room through half-lidded eyes while knitting something shapeless from coarse wool. "You should sleep," the servant girl tells her gently. "Sleep is for people without joints." Hard to argue with that. You pull the blanket tighter around yourself while the warmth from the fire fades gradually against creeping cold. Beyond the shutters, the wind has calmed entirely now. Frost owns the town outside. The friar notices you staring toward the windows. "Clear mornings freeze hardest," he says quietly. "You travel again tomorrow. If God allows." A practical answer. Many medieval travelers speak this way. Roads remain uncertain enough that tomorrow itself feels conditional. Nearby, the sailors finally settle down after losing interest in dice. One removes his boots, and immediately regrets exposing everyone to the consequences. The dog lifts its head, looks offended, and relocates farther from the smell. Honestly, wise choice. The rebec player has fallen asleep upright against the wall, instrument still resting across his knees. A candle beside him burns low and crooked, wax pooling onto the table in pale rivers. The innkeeper notices instantly and strides over. "No open flames near sleepers," he mutters. Another rule of midnight inns. Candles kill carelessly. Most medieval buildings remain timber-framed, packed close together, layered with dry straw, rushes, cloth, and smoke-blackened beams. One overturned candle in the wrong place can turn a sleeping hall into panic within minutes. So lanterns are lowered, candles pinched out, hearths banked carefully. And still towns burn. The servant girl begins distributing chamber pots toward darker corners of the hall, with all the exhausted dignity of someone performing necessary work nobody respects enough. A sailor points weakly toward the upper rooms. They get private pots. They pay private money. Again, impossible to argue. You notice little nighttime rituals unfolding quietly everywhere now. The pilgrim near the hearth tucks his boots beneath his head so nobody steals them before dawn. One merchant ties a bell to his travel sack. The friar sprinkles holy water lightly across his blanket from a tiny flask no larger than an egg. For protection, you whisper. For bed bugs. He smiles faintly afterward. At least you think he is joking. Even now, it is hard to tell. The innkeeper finally lowers the room's remaining lanterns until only two stay lit beside the hearth and staircase. Darkness gathers heavily around the edges of the hall. Shadows swallow corners whole. You hear scratching again somewhere within the walls. Rats, perhaps. Or mice. Old inns belong partly to animals, no matter how fiercely humans disagree. The old woman pauses knitting. "Listen," she murmurs suddenly. The room stills. At first you hear only breathing and embers shifting softly. Then, faintly beyond the shutters, comes the distant sound of bells. Not abbey bells. Smaller. Irregular. The watch patrol moving through town streets. A merchant relaxes immediately. Thought it was funeral bells. "Not at this hour," says the friar. "No one buries folk at night." The old woman sniffs. Some do. Nobody asks further. The watch bells fade slowly into the frozen distance outside. Somewhere a horse stamps in the stable yard. Frost crackles faintly against the shutters as temperatures fall lower still. The innkeeper stretches stiff shoulders beside the hearth. 2 more hours till Baker's wake, he mutters. The servant girl looks horrified. 2, then bread ovens start, then carts, then market bells, then everyone complains breakfast costs too much. A beautiful world. Terrible world, he corrects gently. Yet there is affection hidden beneath his exhaustion. Because inns do this to people, they turn survival into routine. Mud, travellers, storms, soup, fleas, arguments, laughter, endless firewood, endless dishes, endless stories. The medieval world passing nightly through one smoky room. The stranger upstairs remains unseen, but occasionally the floorboards creak overhead, as though he still walks wakefully across the chamber instead of sleeping. The innkeeper notices too. His eyes drift upward briefly toward the ceiling. No one can quite agree whether messengers travel more dangerously than soldiers. Soldiers at least ride openly. Messengers carry secrets. And secrets often attract trouble faster than gold. The fire sinks lower once more. Travellers curl deeper beneath blankets and cloaks. The sailors finally surrender to sleep completely. The friar snores softly into his hood. You lie back against the hard bench, watching embers pulse red beneath drifting smoke. And somewhere beyond the barred doors, the frozen medieval night waits patiently for dawn. You wake again to the sound of dripping. Slow at first, then everywhere. For a confused moment, you think rain has returned, but the air beyond the shutters feels too still for weather. The dripping comes from eaves thawing slightly under the faintest suggestion of morning still far beyond sight. Frost has gathered hard in the night, and now the inn exhales little beads of water from roof edges, gutters, window frames, and every tired seam in its old timber bones. The common room lies dim and crowded around you. Bodies sleep in uneven shapes beneath cloaks, sacks, and wool blankets. The fire has been banked low, but not dead. Red coals glow beneath ash like hidden eyes. A single lantern burns near the stair, turned low enough that its light barely reaches the floor. You hear movement outside. Not travellers. Workers. A latch lifts somewhere near the kitchen. Feet cross the yard. A bucket knocks against stone. Someone whispers sharply, followed by the wet splash of water thrown into mud. The inn is awake beneath its sleeping guests. You sit up slowly, every joint giving its private opinion of the bench. It is not a kind opinion. Near the hearth, the servant girl moves quietly with a bundle of fresh kindling beneath one arm. She kneels before the embers and coaxes them back to life with practiced breath. Smoke curls into her face. She does not even flinch. Medieval mornings begin long before morning, especially in inns. Fires must be revived, pots scrubbed, ale fetched, bread sliced, horses fed, blankets shaken, floors swept, chamber pots emptied, a task that never inspires songs but probably deserves one more than most battles do. The servant notices you awake. Couldn't sleep. Not sure the bench wanted me to. It never wants anyone. She feeds kindling into the coals until small flames lick upward. Warmth returns slowly, creeping along the stones. From the rear yard comes another sharp sound, a horse snorting, followed by the stable boy's sleepy curse. The dog lifts its head from beside the hearth, considers joining the labour of the world, then lowers its chin again. A wise creature remains wise. You pull your cloak around yourself and step carefully between sleepers toward the rear door. The floor rushes are damp and flattened, mixed now with crumbs, ash, spilled ale, and the mysterious remains of a long night among strangers. Some inns keep floors sweet with strewn herbs, rosemary, lavender, meadowsweet. This one has mostly gone with historical evidence. Outside, the yard is dark blue and bitter cold. Frost silvered the puddles after rain stopped, but now the first movement of work has broken the thin ice into black shards. Lantern light trembles across mud churned by hooves and boots. The stable roof drips steadily. Each drop lands with a tiny sound that seems large in the hush before dawn. The stable boy carries hay to the stalls, shoulders hunched against cold. The old stable hand checks harness buckles by lantern light, blowing into his fingers between tasks. One mule watches everyone with open contempt, as if disappointed by the entire species of mankind. "Morning," stable hand mutters. "Is it near enough to start suffering?" This feels accurate. A kitchen servant crosses the yard with a bucket of ashes from the hearth. Another hauls water from the well, moving carefully because frozen rope has roughened beneath his hands. In winter, even simple work becomes negotiation with cold. Beside the kitchen wall, bundles of herbs hang under the eaves: sage, rue, feverfew, dried nettles tied with twine. Inns keep such things for broth, wounds, stomach trouble, and every little complaint travellers bring with them. Some swear feverfew eases headaches, others say rue drives away sickness. No one can quite agree whether the herbs cure more than they comfort, but comfort itself has value when physicians are costly and leeches are having a very busy century. You watch the servant girl emerge carrying a pot of water gone cloudy from washing bowls. She throws it toward the ditch. "Mind your boots," she says too late. A splash dots your hem. Medieval hospitality, like medieval medicine, often arrives after the damage. From inside the stable comes a low chant. You step closer. The younger pilgrim from the hearth stands beside his pack, murmuring prayers while tying his sandals. The older pilgrim tightens the straps around his relic case and rubs warmth into his hands. Both look as though sleep was a rumor told by unreliable people. "Leaving early, you ask?" "Before the gate crowd," the older one says. The younger pilgrim looks toward the eastern sky, still black above the rooftops. And before the marsh road softens. Roads change by hour. Frozen mud can bear carts at dawn, then turn treacherous by noon. Travellers learn to move when the earth allows it, not when comfort suggests. Near the stable entrance, the old charm of rowan, garlic, and juniper stirs slightly in the cold air. The stable hand notices you looking. Worked, didn't it? No witches. No sick horses. A practical measure of success. Inside the inn, voices begin rising as more guests wake. Someone complains about missing gloves. Someone else insists he never received a blanket, though he is currently wearing two. A sailor groans from beneath a table as though discovering life again and disapproving of it. The innkeeper appears at the rear doorway tying his belt, hair flattened on one side from sleep. He surveys the yard, the mud, the servants, the horses, and you. You awake by choice. I heard dripping. Roof does that. Better than falling. Again, the standards here remain humble but firm. He turns toward the stable hand. North Merchant wants his mare fed first. She can wait. He paid. She can wait politely. The innkeeper accepts this answer with a grunt and disappears back indoors. Some swear inn yards reveal more truth than common rooms. Inside, travellers boast and bargain beneath firelight. Outside, before dawn, everything becomes plain, tired servants, restless horses, cracked buckets, frozen fingers, and the constant labour required to make one night of shelter seem almost effortless. You stand a moment longer beneath the dripping eaves. The dark is thinning now, not light yet, but less black than before. Rooflines emerge against the sky. Smoke begins rising from distant houses, somewhere beyond the town. A cock crows once, sounding deeply surprised by its own responsibility. Then the abbey bell begins. One slow note, then another. Before the first true morning, the medieval world gathers itself in cold smoke, mud, and breath. And inside the boar and lantern, every sleeper will soon be required to become a traveller again. The abbey bells continue rolling across the frozen town while darkness slowly loosens its grip on the streets. Inside the boar and lantern, the morning begins not with peace but with movement. Blankets are folded badly, boots hunted desperately. Travellers rise from benches and pallets with the stiff caution of people rediscovering their bones one joint at a time. The common room smells entirely different now, cold ashes, damp wool, stale ale, smoke, and the first sharp scent of fresh bread arriving from the kitchen. That smell alone revives half the room. The innkeeper strides between tables carrying a candle stub and a wooden tally board already covered in chalk marks. Up, he growls toward his sleeping sailor beneath the table. The sailor opens one eye. I'm dead. Dead men still pay for ale. The sailor groans himself upright while nearby travellers laugh quietly into their cups. Morning humour in medieval inns tends to be practical and merciless. You pull on cold boots that feel faintly damp despite hours near the fire. Across the room, merchants tighten belts around thick cloaks while pilgrims repack satchels with sleepy determination. One carter stands near the hearth, thawing frozen gloves above the rekindled flames. The servant girl passes carrying trenchers stacked with coarse bread, hard cheese, and steaming onion pottage. Her expression suggests she has already lived through 3 separate mornings before sunrise fully arrived. The dog near the hearth watches breakfast with focused spiritual devotion. Outside, wheels already grind faintly across distant streets. The market day begins. The friar from last night sits near the fire, warming both hands around a clay cup while muttering morning prayers beneath his breath. Frost still clings to the edges of his robe where rainwater froze overnight. Road West Clear asks a merchant nearby. For now, the friar says, though bridge tolls doubled again. Groans ripple immediately through the room. Nothing unites medieval travellers faster than hatred of tolls. One merchant launches into a detailed complaint involving corrupt river lords, rotten bridge planks, and a goose stolen 3 winters ago under suspicious circumstances. No one fully follows the story, but everyone supports the emotion behind it. Near the wall, the scribe from earlier sharpens a quill carefully with a tiny knife while sipping watered wine. Ink stains still darken his fingertips. You glance toward the staircase. No sign yet of the stranger upstairs. Interesting. The innkeeper notices your attention. Messenger left before bells, he mutters quietly while wiping cups. You saw him go. Didn't hear him leave. That's worse. You're not entirely sure what that means, though it sounds appropriately ominous for dawn. Outside the shutters, the sky turns slowly from black to deep grey blue. Smoke rises from chimneys across the town. Somewhere nearby, bakers open oven doors with dull iron clangs. The smell of fresh rye bread drifts through cracks in the shutters and nearly causes a spiritual experience among the hungrier travellers. The younger pilgrim near the hearth carefully pins his little saint badges back onto his cloak one by one before departure. Lose many, you ask? Enough. Do they truly protect travellers? The older pilgrim shrugs while chewing bread. They remind people someone survived the road before them. That answer lingers pleasantly. At the far table, 2 merchants compare weather signs while stuffing gloves with straw for warmth. Medieval winters invade everything. Boots freeze stiff overnight. Water buckets crust with ice. Fingers crack open from cold and leather work. One sailor swears rubbing goose fat into boots keeps feet warm longer. Another sailor points out this also makes boots smell like cooked dinner. The argument continues surprisingly seriously. The innkeeper finally raises his voice above the room. Gate opens at first full bell. Anyone leaving East Road should move now before wagons choke the bridge. Instant movement follows. Travellers gather belongings quickly because roads reward early departures. Frozen ground hardens before sunrise traffic churns it back into mud. Ferries grow crowded later. Market tolls increase. Town gates jam with carts and livestock. The medieval world wakes early because daylight itself remains precious. You step toward the shutters and lift one slightly. Cold air rushes inside sharp as river water. Outside, dawn finally reveals the town. Narrow streets glisten with thawing frost. Smoke curls upward between leaning timber houses. A baker's boy runs carrying baskets beneath a linen cloth. Watchmen finish their final patrol beside the walls. Somewhere farther downhill, church bells answer one another through pale mist. And already travellers move. Carts creak through muddy lanes. Pilgrims tighten cloaks against morning cold. Pack horses snort steam into the air while drovers curse softly beside them. The roads call everyone onward again. No one stays at inns longer than necessary unless illness, weather, or poverty traps them there. Medieval inns exist between destinations, never fully belonging to anybody. Behind you, breakfast disappears quickly. Trenchers empty, ale cups refill lightly for courage against the cold. One exhausted sailor falls asleep face first into bread and remains there briefly in peaceful surrender. The servant girl nudges him awake with remarkable precision. You leave or you pay another night. Cruel woman. Experienced woman. Fair. The old chestnut woman appears at last from the rear chamber wrapped in a thick wool shawl. She squints toward the room as though personally offended by mourning. Before anyone departs, she moves from traveller to traveller, muttering little blessings almost under her breath. For steady wheels, for dry roads, for honest ferrymen, that last one may qualify as an outright miracle request. When she reaches the pilgrims, she presses dried lavender into their hands. For bad air, she says. The Black Death remains within living memory for many regions. Even generations later, people distrust foul smells deeply. Sweet herbs, incense, flowers, smoke all become defenses against unseen sickness carried through crowded towns and inns. Some swear plague ride's bad air itself. Others blame stars. Others foreigners. Humanity remains remarkably consistent across centuries. The abbey bells ring again. Louder now. First full morning. The innkeeper lifts the heavy crossbar from the front door. Cold light spills inward across rush-covered floors, and weary travellers gathering cloaks, staffs, purses, relics, and half-finished breakfasts. The boar and lantern survived another night. Soon it will fill again with new strangers carrying fresh mud, new rumours and different fears. But for now, dawn belongs to departures. The moment the inn door opens fully, winter rushes inside. Cold air pours across the common room carrying river mist, chimney smoke, and the sharp smell of frozen mud already softening beneath wagon wheels. Travellers instinctively pull cloaks tighter before stepping toward the street one by one like ships leaving harbour. The medieval day has begun. Outside, the town feels entirely transformed from the smoky darkness of last night. Dawn reveals crooked timber houses leaning over narrow lanes, frost melting from roof edges, and gutters already running with grey water from thawing ice. Bakers shout from open shop fronts. Carts creak downhill toward the market square. Somewhere nearby, a butcher argues with a drover loud enough to wake saints in their tombs. You step carefully into the street. The mud greets you immediately. Of course it does. No matter how cold the night grows, medieval streets eventually return to mud, hooves churn it, wheels deepen it, rain revives it endlessly. One passing cart splashes your hem before you have even fully accepted morning. The pilgrim beside you barely reacts. Road blessing, he mutters. That feels less like blessing. Road doesn't care. Reasonable again. Behind you, the boar and lantern exhales smoke into pale morning sky while servants begin hauling buckets, sweeping rushes, and dragging empty ale barrels toward the rear yard. Already the inn resets itself for the next wave of travellers. The innkeeper stands in the doorway watching departures with folded arms. No one can quite agree whether innkeepers become attached to travellers or simply relieved when they leave without burning anything down. Probably both. The merchants head first toward the bridge road, eager to cross before traffic thickens. Sailors disappear downhill toward the river dock still half awake. The friar joins two other clergy moving west beneath dark cloaks dusted with frost. And the pilgrims begin walking east. You fall into step beside them. The town gate ahead stands open now beneath pale grey daylight. Guards stamp cold feet atop the walls while traders argue over tolls below. A woman carrying baskets of smoked fish squeezes past, muttering apologies nobody hears. Somewhere nearby a church bell rings again, slower this time. Morning bells do more than mark time. They organize the entire medieval world. Work begins, markets open, gates unlock, monasteries pray, bakers pull loaves from ovens, blacksmiths light forges, lives move according to bells as much as sunlight. The older pilgrim adjusts his satchel strap. Marsh Road East stays firmer before noon, he says. After that, wagons ruin it. You pass beneath the town gate into open countryside once more, and immediately the world grows quieter. Behind you remains smoke, shouting, bells, and crowded streets. Ahead stretch frost-white fields crossed by muddy tracks winding between hedges bare from winter. River mist drifts low across the earth. Crows move through stubbled farmland searching for grain missed after harvest. The road itself bears scars from endless use. Wheel ruts frozen hard overnight, horse dung glazed with frost, deep footprints preserved like impressions in old wax. Medieval roads rarely deserve the name road at all. Mostly they are agreements between travellers about where suffering should happen repeatedly. The younger pilgrim points toward a roadside shrine ahead, half hidden beneath a leafless oak. A little stone saint stands there, weathered nearly smooth by rain. Fresh herbs rest at its base beside two tiny beeswax candles burned almost to nothing. Travellers leave offerings, you ask. Sometimes for luck, sometimes for thanks, and sometimes for fear. You stop briefly beside the shrine while the pilgrims cross themselves. Someone recently tied little strips of wool around the branches above it. Charms against fever, perhaps, or prayers for safe childbirth. Medieval roads gather private hopes the same way hedges gather snow. Even now, it is hard to tell where religion ends and superstition quietly begins. The older pilgrim touches the stone saint gently. Bandits near here last autumn. Did the shrine help? We survived. Again, difficult to argue. Farther along the road you pass a broken cartwheel abandoned beside a ditch. Frost clings to its spokes. Nearby, a scattering of spilled grain has drawn birds into noisy argument. The younger pilgrim nudges the wheel thoughtfully. Bad sign leaving wheels behind. Why? Means someone couldn't carry on. Medieval journeys depend entirely on fragile things continuing to function. Wheels, horses, weather, bridges, boots, health, luck. One failure can trap travellers for days or worse. Ahead, The road narrows through low woodland where bare branches creak softly in the cold breeze. Sunlight finally begins piercing the mist in pale golden streaks. You realize then how much the inn still clings to you. Smoke in your cloak, hull on your breath, the ache from the bench, the warmth of the hearth lingering in memory against the frozen road ahead. That is the strange power of inns after dark. However rough they are, morning makes them feel almost comforting once you leave. The younger pilgrim suddenly laughs quietly. What? I still hear that sailor talking to turnips. You smile despite the cold. Behind you, another group of travellers emerges from the town gate merchants with pack mules, 2 armed guards, and a woman carrying bundles of dyed wool beneath oilcloth. Road communities form and dissolve constantly like drifting smoke. People walk together for safety a while, then separate toward different rivers, abbeys, fairs, and towns. No one stays together forever. The older pilgrim reaches into his satchel and offers you a piece of coarse bread saved from breakfast, hard already from the cold. You accept gratefully. Many roads ahead, you ask. Always a simple truth. The marshland appears gradually beyond the trees, flat pale ground threaded with frozen water channels and reed beds rattling softly in the wind. Wooden posts mark the safer crossings. Some lean badly sideways. Those who tell the tale never fully agree how many travellers disappear in marsh country each winter. Too many paths look solid until stepped upon. Fog confuses direction. Wagon wheels sink. Strange lights appear after sunset. The younger pilgrim notices you staring across the mist. Best not travel marsh roads after dark. Ghosts. Worse. Bandits. Mud. Honestly, the mud has already proven itself formidable. The road carries you onward through the cold, bright morning while bells fade slowly behind you. And somewhere back within the town walls, the Boran lantern prepares quietly for another night of smoke. Strangers and weary travellers seeking warmth beneath soot-black rafters. The farther you walk from the town, the more the memory of the inn begins to soften into something almost dreamlike. Smoke lingering in wool, lantern light across wet tables, the murmur of strangers breathing beneath rafters while frost gathered outside. Already it feels distant, though only a few hours have passed. The marsh road stretches ahead in long pale ribbons of frozen mud winding through reeds and shallow pools filmed with ice. Wooden causeways appear now and then where the ground turns treacherous. Some boards creak alarmingly beneath passing carts. Others simply surrender halfway into the marsh and wait there quietly for future victims. The older pilgrim taps one with his walking staff before crossing. Trust wood less than monks, he mutters. That bad. Wood breaks honestly. Monks ask questions first. The younger pilgrim laughs hard enough to fog the cold air. Morning brightens gradually around you. Weak winter sunlight glows through river mist while crows drift above the marshland searching for anything edible or recently unfortunate. Somewhere far off, you hear the dull thump of axes from unseen woodsmen working among frozen trees. Travellers begin appearing along the road more frequently now. A wool cart creaking west toward town. 2 barefoot monks leading a mule loaded with barrels. A woman carrying baskets of dried herbs beneath a fur-lined cloak. Everyone nods politely without truly stopping. Medieval roads create temporary companionship but discourage unnecessary delay during winter. Cold rewards movement. You notice little signs of road life everywhere once you begin looking closely. Bits of straw caught in frozen wheel ruts, ashes from old roadside fires, broken leather straps abandoned beside ditches, tiny scraps of cloth tied to branches near shrines for luck or healing. At one crossroad stands a weathered wooden post carved with fading directional marks pointing toward distant abbeys and market towns. Someone has nailed a horseshoe onto it upside down. The younger pilgrim frowns immediately. Bad luck. Why? Luck runs out. You consider mentioning gravity, but decide the morning is too peaceful for philosophy. Near the crossroads rests a tiny roadside shelter built from rough timber and roofed with moss-dark thatch. Inside sits an old charcoal burner warming his hands above a clay brazier. The smell reaches you before the smoke does. Burnt wood, damp wool, bitter herbs steeping in hot water. He lifts 2 fingers in greeting as you pass. Bridge ahead flooded last week, he warns. Use the stone crossing north side. The older pilgrim nods gratefully. Road news travels constantly this way, not through maps or signs, but through exhausted conversations beside fires, wells, ferries, and inn tables. Travellers become living pieces of geography. No one can quite agree whether medieval roads are more dangerous because of weather, robbers, or misinformation. Probably whichever you encounter first. The marsh gives way slowly to open farmland where frost still clings silver across empty fields. Thin smoke rises from distant cottages clustered beneath bare trees. Sheep move like dirty clouds across hillsides while shepherd dogs bark somewhere unseen. You pass a small manor court near midday. Not grand. Just a squat stone hall surrounded by timber sheds and muddy yards. A faded banner hangs limp above the gate while peasants line up beside a steward seated at a table outdoors despite the cold. Taxes, perhaps, or disputes, or winter grain records. The steward's fingers are stained dark with ink, while a shivering scribe scratches notes onto parchment beside him. Medieval administration happens slowly, coldly, and usually outdoors for some unfortunate reason. The younger pilgrim lowers his voice as you pass. Never linger near manor courts. Why? Too many people deciding things. Solid advice. Beyond the manor, the road climbs gently through low hills scattered with thorn bushes and frost-stiff grass. The sun rises higher but offers little warmth. Wind moves steadily now across the open ground, carrying smells of distant chimneys and frozen earth. The older pilgrim eventually stops near a roadside fire pit ringed with stones blackened from years of use. Rest a while. You sit gratefully upon a fallen log while the younger pilgrim unwraps bread and hard cheese from cloth. Nearby hangs a little wooden shrine fixed to a tree trunk, no bigger than your hand. Inside rests a painted saint darkened almost beyond recognition by weather and smoke. Someone recently left onion skins there. Offerings become humble during winter. The older pilgrim notices your curiosity. Travellers feed saints what they can spare. Do saints eat onions? They endure them better than we do. A fair point after last night's pottage. You eat quietly while ravens croak overhead. Wind rattles dead reeds along a frozen stream nearby. The road itself never fully stills. Every so often another traveller appears in the distance, growing slowly larger before passing onward into mist again. Temporary lives crossing briefly. A merchant heading east warns of crowded ferries farther south. A peddler claims wolves were heard near the northern woods 2 nights ago. An old woman carrying bundles of dried lavender insists sickness spreads through one village ahead, where children wear garlic around their necks to ward off bad air. Even now, it is hard to tell whether medieval people survived by believing these things or survived because they believe them. The younger pilgrim lies briefly upon the frozen grass staring upward. Funny thing about inns, he murmurs. What? You miss them most after leaving. You think about the boar and lantern again. The innkeeper grumbling beside the hearth. The rebeck music drifting through smoke. The stable lanterns glowing against frost. The old woman blessing travellers before dawn. Strange how quickly discomfort becomes nostalgia once replaced by cold roads. The older pilgrim rises first. We should move before sunset. Always the calculation. Distance against daylight. Warmth against roads. Shelter against open sky. You continue westward now beneath the pale winter afternoon while clouds begin gathering slowly over distant hills. The marshlands fade behind you. Ahead waits another town eventually, another inn, another smoky room full of strangers carrying stories and mud beneath their boots. And somewhere far behind, the Boran lantern grows smaller within memory, though its warmth still follows you through the cold. By late afternoon, the winter light has already begun fading again. The medieval world does this quickly in cold seasons. One moment pale sunlight stretches across frozen fields, and the next long shadows gather beneath hedges while smoke rises thicker from distant chimneys. The road ahead turns dim silver beneath a sky slowly deepening toward evening. You walk more quietly now. The younger pilgrim hums softly beneath his breath while the older man leans harder upon his staff with each mile. Frost returns to the edges of puddles where sunlight no longer reaches. Crows settle into bare trees. Somewhere far away, a bell tolls across the countryside so faintly it almost sounds imagined. And gradually, without quite noticing when it begins, your thoughts drift back to the inn. Not just the boar and lantern itself, but all such places scattered along medieval roads. The warm windows glimpsed through rain, the stable lanterns glowing against darkness, the smell of wood smoke caught in wet cloaks, the low murmur of strangers sharing one fire for a single night before vanishing toward different horizons by morning. In daylight, inns often look rough and ordinary. Crooked roofs, muddy yards, smoke-black beams. Yet after sunset, when roads grow cold and uncertain, they become something else entirely. Little islands. Small circles of human warmth holding back enormous dark fields and forests and rivers beyond the walls. The road bends uphill through sparse woodland where branches click softly together in the evening wind. Thin ice glitters beside the path. Your boots ache. Your shoulders ache. Even the younger pilgrim has stopped humming. But ahead, through the trees at last, you see it. Another inn, far away still. Only a faint square of amber light glowing through dusk. Yet every traveller on the road notices immediately. The older pilgrim smiles first. There. Just that one word. There. A roof. A fire. A place where somebody is already stirring pottage above coals while another traveller removes muddy boots beside the hearth. Somewhere inside, candles burn low against smoke-dark rafters. Somewhere a stable hand rubs down tired horses while muttering about weather. Somewhere an innkeeper counts cups and worries about firewood and listens for late knocking at the door. And somehow, even from this distance, you already know exactly how it will smell inside. Smoke. Allez. Wet wool. Rushes. Bread. Human life packed close against winter. You continue walking while twilight thickens around the fields. The road softens beneath thawing frost. A thin crescent moon appears behind drifting cloud. No one speaks much anymore. The medieval world quiets naturally at this hour. Farmers close shutters against cold. Abbey bells call monks toward evening prayer. Market carts creak homeward through muddy lanes. Dogs curl beside hearths. Candles are trimmed carefully because wax costs dearly, and darkness comes early. You pass another roadside shrine half hidden beneath ivy-covered stone. A tiny beeswax candle still burns inside despite the wind. Someone lit it recently. Perhaps for a missing traveller. Perhaps for safe childbirth. Perhaps simply because people fear long roads after dark and small lights feel important. No one can quite agree whether prayers change the world much, but the world seems lonelier without them. The inner head grows clearer now. You see smoke rising from its chimney into the darkening sky. Lanterns sway near the stable gate. A horse stamps softly somewhere beyond the yard wall. The younger pilgrim laughs quietly. What? I can already hear snoring. The older pilgrim nods. Means the roof works. Simple standards again. Yet perhaps simple standards are enough. A warm fire. Dry straw. Bread. Walls thick enough to hold back wind. After days upon medieval roads, luxury becomes very small and very precious. The first stars emerge overhead while you approach the inn-yard slowly through deepening dusk. Frost gathers silver along fences. The lantern by the gate crackles softly in the wind. Inside the stable, horses breathe clouds of steam into the cold air. You pause before entering. Just for a moment. Behind you stretches the long road already fading into darkness. Somewhere far beyond those hills stands the boar and lantern, where another night has likely begun already. New travellers now crowd the hearth. New merchants complain about tolls. New sailors drink too much ale beneath soot-black beams. The dog steals food from strangers with professional confidence. The innkeeper grumbles. The fire burns. The bells continue marking hours. And tomorrow morning, those travellers too will vanish back onto muddy roads beneath winter skies. The world keeps moving that way, slowly, endlessly. One inn to another, one fire to another, one sheltering roof beneath darkness after another. You step at last toward the warm glow ahead while the night settles softly over the fields behind you. And now the pace of everything begins to slow. The wind softens among the trees. The voices inside the inn drift gently outward through shutters glowing gold against blue-black evening. Your tired boots sink into damp earth one final time before wooden floorboards replace mud beneath your feet again. The smell of smoke wraps around you. The warmth reaches your cold hands. Somewhere nearby, bread crackles softly near the fire. You hear low conversation, the shifting of benches, the sleepy sigh of a dog settling beside the hearth. Nothing grand, nothing heroic, just ordinary people surviving another winter night together beneath old beams and candlelight. And perhaps that is why medieval inns linger so deeply in memory. Not because they were comfortable. Often they were not. Not because they were clean. Very much not. But because after endless miles of cold road, dark forest, uncertain weather, toll gates, aching feet, and lonely fields, an inn meant human voices in the dark, a lantern in the window, a little warmth held against the night. The fire crackles softly now. The wind fades beyond thick walls. Your eyes grow heavy while the sounds of the medieval world drift farther away into smoke and amber light, and distant bells dissolving gently across winter fields. The road can wait until morning. Tonight there is shelter. Tonight there is warmth. And beyond the shuttered windows, the dark grows quiet at last.